This is the Chris Stigall Show podcast.
Okay, guys, let's just rip. And Chris Stigall.
Chris Stigall. Chris, thanks for being with me tonight.
Chris Stigall.
I'm joined now by Chris Stigall.
Now, he puts the broad in broadband. It's Chris Stigall.
The Chris Stigall podcast is presented by usmedicalplan.com. Save big money monthly and get better health coverage at usmedicalplan.com.
All right, it's Friday. No rest in this week, folks. It is the 9th day of June. It's a rough day for those of us who love the country and love the traditions and the underpinnings of a blind system of justice, equal justice under the law. Anybody who is fair-minded knows what a dark day it is. So it's hard to sugarcoat it. Johnathan Emord, constitutional scholar, will be a part of today's show. I'm going to get reaction from the former national security advisor to Donald Trump as well. Lieutenant General Kellogg will be here. I also want to kind of pick his brain on some assertions Tucker made this week that maybe Russia was involved in blowing up this dam in Ukraine, as well as the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Just a great, smart guy, a couple of great, smart guys to offer their comments and their thoughts. Of course, I have my own about the news yesterday that Trump was indicted, and I will round out this show today. Stay with it. While it's heavy, I don't want to leave it heavy. I actually close with something that happened yesterday while I was filling in on the Vince Colonnese show in Washington, D.C. You're going to love. So if you want to cheat and fast forward to the funny, that's fine. You can skip the rest of today's show. But I try to analyze as fairly and honestly as I can where I am mentally with this Trump indictment. But the payoff today, hilariously funny if you haven't heard it. I talked about it already on the radio shows. It involves an interview I did with a very serious journalist in Washington, D.C. yesterday, and something very unexpected that came from it, and wound up making media coverage. I'm not kidding. News coverage over how an interview with this reporter ended that I was conducting on the radio in Washington, D.C. yesterday. So hang on, we'll get to it. But first, the guy that makes this show possible each and every day, John Ruhlman. John runs usmedicalplan.com. usmedicalplan.com. Have you watched the video of my conversation with John at chrisstigall.com? If you haven't, go watch it. You'll get a sense of who he is. We talk about a whole host of issues surrounding insurance, whether you are single, whether you're a senior on a fixed income and you buy a supplemental plan for Medicaid, you buy a plan for your family, you're a small business owner and you buy insurance for your employees. Whatever your scenario, John's going to get you into a better insurance plan for less money. That's a guarantee. I mean, worst case, he says, listen, let's get you enrolled on the government-run Obamacare plan to save you the money. That's absolute worst case, but not where he wants to take it. Generally, 30 to 60% savings on a private sector health insurance plan. That's generally the case, 30 to 60% savings and always better coverage. You younger people, if you don't call John, you're crazy. I mean, if you're a younger person, if you're in your, if I'd say you're in your 30s or younger and you're paying out of pocket for your own health insurance and you don't call John, you're nuts. You could actually have health insurance that cuts you checks when you go to a hospital or a doctor. Seriously. Let him explain it to you. usmedicalplan.com or 877-410-4321. Well, I'm thrilled to hear from my friend Jason Perrett at Eagle Wealth Planning that you are reaching out for some financial counsel in 2023. Jason is a financial advisor at Eagle Wealth Planning. And as a guy who I know is invested as a fiduciary in your financial goals and yours alone, he's not trying to move product. His entire MO is sitting down with you and exploring your financial future. He's dedicated to providing clients with complete wealth management and investment services along with highly personalized professional assistance. He wants to reach this audience. He values you. He knows you're a smart, savvy person, and maybe you're retired and you're not particularly happy with your wealth management. Maybe you're young and just getting started and you're not entirely sure what to do and you want to get started with investing. So whether it's millions, whether it's a few thousand, whatever it is, let Jason Perrett go to work to keep you on a sound footing and a financial future that he's constantly evaluating, by the way. He's checking in with you. You're a team in this. It's not just sticking your money in a fund and forgetting about it. It's also not making wild knee-jerk reactions to the marketplace. Jason's in this for long-term financial independence for you. That's his job. Jason regularly revisits your goals and assesses your risk tolerance. So it's a real partnership. I want you to meet him. This guy is deadly serious about keeping you on track and getting you to your financial destination. Whether you are an entrepreneur who's been, very, very successful, maybe near retirement, maybe you are retired. And like I said, even young people who are just getting started and trying to figure it out. Reach out to Jason for your wealth planning needs at Eagle Wealth Planning. He is linked on my website. Go to chrisstigall.com and click on the Eagle Wealth Planning logo. It'll take you right to his site. You can call him today, 816-394-8117. Jason Perrette, 816-394-8117. He's Jason at eaglewealthplanning.com if you want to email him. Jason at eaglewealthplanning.com. I hope that you will. Please tell him that Chris said hi. I see him in church every Sunday, but you tell him I said hi anyway, all right? Securities and advisory services. And by the way, anywhere in the country, I don't care where you hear this. If you're listening to me and you need help with your finances, Jason can help you. Securities and advisory services offered through Cetera Advisors, LLC, member FINRA SIPC, a broker-dealer and a registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. What do you say about this? January 6th kind of paved the way for where we are today. I think everybody understands the gravity of this, so I really don't need to belabor the point, but you understand at this point, today, June 9th, 2023, this nation as we know it is gone, and you're no longer safe from your federal government. I don't know how else to say it. I know that's dark and I know that sounds dim, but this is bigger than Trump. This is the undermining of our judicial system. And it now, beyond a shadow of a doubt, if you don't understand the importance of Donald Trump and if you don't understand the importance of what's going on here, and if you think this is about him, as I said yesterday, you're so incredibly short-sighted. This is no longer about Donald Trump. This is about you, and you and I stand we don't stand a shot, okay? You and I don't stand a shot. If they're successful at this with Donald Trump, you're done. We're done. Our free speech days are done. Your assumption of innocence legally as a conservative is done. We're cooked. So the first thing I would say is I have no choice anymore but to now come to the full-throated conclusion that Donald Trump is my candidate for next year, and I'm not going to play patty cake about it anymore. And I'm not going to pretend, and I can't dance around it, and I already kind of intimated that yesterday. Now, a lot of you will say, and I understand that there are many people who think that this is some sort of chess or checkers game. Yes, do Democrats pick the candidate they want to run against? They do. And have they done so here? Probably. Do I think that Democrats want to run against Donald Trump? Of course I do. Do I think Democrats calculate that this brazen act of criminally indicting a former president while he's declared his candidacy to run against a sitting president, do I believe that this is political retribution? Of course I do, but I also believe at the same time it kills a couple of birds with one stone. It continues to poison the well and animate the American left in their belief that he belongs in an orange jumpsuit and behind bars. It gets them whipped up, but it also they know that it gets people like me whipped up and animated, and they know that this will undoubtedly lie. I mean, I said yesterday, there's no way the Republican field can overcome this. The rage that Americans are feeling over this, as I felt yesterday. I talked to you about it. I know you're feeling that. Most people will close ranks behind Donald Trump now. They're not going to abandon him, quite the opposite. They're ready to charge the gates of hell over this. I know I am. And so Democrats have chosen their candidate. Democrats know they want to run against Donald Trump, and they believe ultimately that's their best chance of success. And some of you may say, well, then doesn't that make a case that we ought not select a guy like Donald Trump? We ought to select a guy like Ron DeSantis. Look, if that's your conclusion, that's your conclusion. I'm not going to talk you out of it. That's not where I am today. I don't feel that we have any choice anymore as a country but to see this through to its natural conclusion wherever it ends. there better be a massive case against Trump. I mean, something big. Like, I don't know if, keep an eye on Mark Meadows. I don't know. Did he flip? Some people are suggesting Mark Meadows flipped in grand jury testimony, and they've really got something good. Because if they don't, this is so much bigger than Trump. It's like surgically mutilating children. What we're seeing is sickening. But the reason is to decimate the family so that they can ultimately replace it with the state. This is no different. This is judicial Marxism, coining that term here today. That's what we're watching. I mean, these are fundraising events. These are ballot collection issues for Republicans. I can't say it enough. This, if ever there were a time for the Republicans to pound the pavement and start ballot collection, now's the time. This is the timeline between due process and equal protection of the laws and communism. We're in the midst of judicial Marxism. I've shared with you at the Harumph Society, faith, family, free markets, all under assault. So now is the judicial system as we know it. This is the fundamental transformation of America. Who said it? Who said it? The architect of all of it. The guy who's overseeing it at present. No, not the husk, Barack Obama. This is we're watching, we're living the fundamental transformation of this country. Trump is but a symbol. Trump is a 75 million vote getting leading Republican challenger to Joe Biden. I reminded people yesterday, if you follow on Twitter, I said, do you remember why Donald Trump was impeached the first time? It was over a stupid phone call to Ukraine. And do you remember what they shrieked and screamed and yelled? They said, I can't believe. Here was the whole premise of that impeachment. That Donald Trump called Ukraine to get dirt on Joe Biden, who, if you remember, at the time, wasn't even the candidate. But the Democrats, if you hit rewind and really think about that period of time, it's kind of telling. They'd already decided the husk was going to be their nominee because of the way they reacted to that. When Trump and his team started to conclude that there was really dirty stuff going down in Ukraine and the Biden family was collecting money, and that began to get uncovered, that's when things, in my view, started to unravel. And that's the Democrat Party had decided that Joe Biden was going to be their husk. They had long decided the husk was going to be their front man. Obama had decided it. And so even though it didn't look like he stood a prayer in the early primary, well before he even declared his candidacy, if you remember, the Democrats started screeching that they couldn't believe that Donald Trump called Ukraine. Do you remember why? Because by all accounts, they said this was going to be the guy that Trump was going to face in a general election. They'd concluded. Do you remember this? They decided that Donald Trump was going to be running against Joe Biden. They decided it. Biden hadn't even declared when that phone call happened. Biden hadn't declared when that news became public that Trump had been on the phone with Zelensky and digging around in Hunter Biden and the Biden family's financial dealings. But they kept screaming, this is unprecedented. We've never seen an abuse of power like this. Donald Trump is using his office to take out his primary political opponent, they screamed. Do you remember this? It wasn't that long ago. Biden hadn't even declared that he was running at that point. But they decided. So if it was the attitude then, that Donald Trump was using the presidency to take out his political opponent, who hadn't even declared, what do you call what happened yesterday? What exactly is this? It's that quadrupled, because Donald Trump has declared his candidacy. Donald Trump is the most vote-getting presidential candidate in Republican history, Republican Party history, and he is likely to go on to be the nominee, and he is likely to go on to be Joe Biden's challenger. And so as such, of course, then you see yesterday, Joe Biden has a joint press conference with the Prime Minister of the UK. And interestingly, all of a sudden, he takes questions. And he does this on the same day that the House Oversight Committee acknowledges that they found at least, Comer said last night he thinks there's evidence that they've taken at least, they think they've probably got evidence of much more than the $5 million that's being reported. They think upwards of $20 million this family has bagged and funneled and laundered between them as a family. He said, we're watching something the likes of a crime family unfolding before our very eyes. Comer and this House Oversight Committee say that's what they've got on him. So on that same day that the FBI turns this over to the House, and the House has this press conference to say we're reading some incredibly damning stuff, Joe Biden mysteriously has a joint press conference for the first time ever and takes a couple of planted questions, which interestingly the press conference ends with him doing one of his stupid smirks and assuring the country, I'm honest. That's what he said.
You notice I have never once, not one single time, suggested to the Justice Department what they should do or not do relative to bringing a charge or not bringing a charge. I'm honest.
Yeah. If you have to say it, if you have to, what does it say? The rule in politics? If you're explaining, you're losing. Joe Biden's last words before the Justice Department announces that Donald Trump is being charged with willfully retaining national defense information. 7-count indictment in Miami. He knows it's coming. The old husk stands there smiling, and his last halting elderly words, I'm honest. On the same day, the Republicans in the House have evidence that the man and his family are bagging probably tens of millions of dollars from foreign governments for influence. And he holds a press conference assuring everyone, I'm honest. He has greenlit, and Merrick Garland, the bowling alley waitress, has greenlit an indictment of a former president, something historic we've never seen in American history. This is the stuff. I mean, when they did it in Manhattan, we said this. By the way, don't forget he's already been indicted. So, I mean, twice impeached. CNN today, the twice impeached, now indicted. He's already been indicted. And by the way, folks, he's likely to be indicted again. I mean, at some point, these indictments are, he's being indicted like Chris Christie's going to have a sandwich. I mean, it's like, that's going to happen. I mean, no one's surprised. It's just so flagrantly disgusting. So, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I brought in some of the greatest thinkers that I know to help us break down and analyze this from a legal perspective, if there is anything to it. But you know what I just thought about today? And it's apropos of nothing, but I thought it would be useful to just go back in time, because I vividly remember, I was just thinking about just modern times. July, it was July of 2016. I remember sitting at the airport waiting for some family to come in. I'm sitting in the cell phone lot at Philadelphia International Airport. And it's the day that James Comey holds a press conference on what the FBI has found on Hillary Clinton. And as he's giving that press conference, it was 15 minutes in length. I went back and watched it last night. And as he's giving this thing, and I'm sitting there listening to it, waiting for some people to land, I think to myself, my God, he's laying out a criminal case against Hillary Clinton for destroying private property, government property. He's laying out a case that Hillary Clinton kept illegal servers and communicated illegally in highly sensitive settings. She behaved in a corrupt way. My gosh, are we watching James Comey laying out the case that he's about to recommend to the DOJ she be indicted for criminal mishandling of classified information? Is that what we're hearing? Of course, that's ultimately not what we heard, is it? Let me just give you, and forgive the kind of the, sorry about this, folks. Forgive the kind of the rawness of my rolling here on the audio, but I didn't brief Fast Eddie on this, so I'm kind of doing this on my own. The press conference, I just went back and familiarized with myself a little bit, and I'm going to scoot ahead to about the 8-minute mark in this thing, just to kind of, as he starts to lay out what he found. It's good to refresh our memories about this stuff is all.
We did not find elsewhere and that are now gone because they deleted all emails they did not produce to state, and the lawyers then cleaned their devices in such a way as to preclude complete forensic recovery. We have conducted interviews and done technical examination to attempt to understand exactly how that sorting was done by her attorneys. Although we don't have complete visibility because we're not able to fully reconstruct the electronic record of that sorting, we believe our investigation has been sufficient to give us reasonable confidence there was no intentional misconduct in connection with that sorting effort. And of course, in addition to our technical work, we interviewed many people, from those involved in setting up the personal email system and maintaining the various iterations of Secretary Clinton's server, to staff members with whom she corresponded on email, to those involved in the email production to state, and finally, Secretary Clinton herself. Last, we have done extensive work to try to understand what indications there might be of compromise by hostile actors in connection with that personal email system. So that's what we've done. Now let me tell you what we found. Although we did not find clear evidence that Secretary Clinton or her colleagues intended to violate laws governing the handling of classified information, there is evidence that they were extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information.
You hear this?
For example, 7 email chains concern matters that were classified at the top secret special access program at the time they were sent and received. Those chains involve Secretary Clinton both sending emails about those matters and receiving emails about those same matters. There is evidence to support a conclusion that any reasonable person in Secretary Clinton's position or in the position of those with whom she was corresponding about those matters should have known that an unclassified system was no place for that conversation.
So are you with me so far? Little trip back in time in 2016. That's the FBI Director, James Comey, laying out a case that she kept an illegal server she shouldn't have had, and everybody knew she had it, and she should not have had it. Period. Full stop. The presence of keeping an illegal server was enough. Then what was she doing on it? Communicating at the highest of levels with deeply sensitive materials, and she knew. And Comey's sitting there standing there saying, any reasonable person can conclude this is reckless and dangerous and irresponsible.
In addition to this highly sensitive information, we also found information that was properly classified as secret by the U.S. intelligence community at the time it was discussed on email. That is, excluding any later up-classified emails. None of these emails should have been on any kind of unclassified system, but their presence is especially concerning because all of these emails were housed on unclassified personal servers, not even supported by full-time security staff like those found at agencies and departments of the United States government, or even with a commercial email service like Gmail.
This is a sitting United States Secretary of State. This is the FBI Director telling you, I can't believe what we've found. This is as reckless as it gets. She knows exactly what she was doing. Everybody involved with her knew exactly what she was doing, and yet, and then, of course, he also laid out the case that she had destroyed a lot of evidence, and they knew it, and that was wrong. So I'm scooting ahead here just to go to the conclusion of his remarks, what they ultimately ended up recommending. Now, remember, he's FBI Director, so he's not the prosecutor, but he's making this very public show of this because it's what? It's a presidential election cycle, and she's the candidate. She's the Democrat candidate for president. And he has just laid out a case that this woman maintained an illegal server she shouldn't have had and she knew she shouldn't have had. She destroyed evidence, and she knew she destroyed evidence she shouldn't have destroyed and didn't hand over to the government. She traded information in a deeply irresponsible way with foreign governments on foreign soil in many cases, and made her files and her server highly corruptible. Reckless. James Comey is laying out the most irresponsible, purposeful, willful, reckless behavior you've ever heard, and ultimately concludes,
number of people and readily apparent. She also used her personal email extensively while outside the United States, including sending and receiving work-related emails in the territory of sophisticated adversaries. Given that combination of factors, we assess it is possible that hostile actors gained access to Secretary Clinton's personal email
This is
account.
pretty bad, right? You're listening to this and
So
you're
that's what
thinking,
we found.
she's going to go to jail,
Finally,
maybe.
with respect to our recommendation to the Department of Justice.
Now listen to this.
In our system, the prosecutors make the decisions about whether charges are appropriate based on evidence that the FBI helps collect. Although we don't normally make public our recommendations to the prosecutors, we frequently make recommendations and engage in productive conversations with prosecutors about what resolution may be appropriate given the evidence. In this case, given the importance of the matter, I think unusual transparency is in order. Although there is evidence of potential violations of the statutes regarding the handling of classified information, our judgment is that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case.
And I sat stunned. I sat in my car that day stunned. Remember that? I do. I was tuned in. I was ready for this. And he was laying out a case. You heard just some of it. That was, just chunks of the full 15 minutes. And what you just heard was an incredible indictment of this woman and her clearly reckless, if not criminal behavior. And Comey concludes all that by saying, no reasonable person can conclude we should charge Hillary Clinton with crimes. What? Now, when Donald Trump became president, what did he do about this? What did he do about it?
He let it go.
He let it go. Because in this system, the people spoke. The people spoke, and they did not elect this woman president of the United States. That's the ultimate injustice. And so if the Department of Justice decided not to do its job, the American people did, and Donald Trump won an election. She did not, and she was banished to the political ash heap of history. And that's the way the system should work. And Donald Trump didn't lock her up and put her in an orange jumpsuit. I know there are a lot of people in this audience, and I'm one who thought she should, but he didn't. He used 200 plus years of history and said, the American people have spoken, that's enough. We're moving forward. Fast forward to today. And this husk and Barack Obama and these Marxists have thrown out the window all that. 200 years of precedent, they've thrown it out the window. 200 plus years. And now it's about political retribution. And now it's about something far greater than just Donald Trump. It's about you and me. This is about one-party rule. This is about silencing voices of opposition. I believe this cements Donald Trump as the Republican nominee for president. I believe they want to run against him. There's been a lot of speculative talk about, okay, if Trump is successful, can he pardon himself, which would be amazing and unthinkable, but you could actually walk yourself through it and see it. Victor Davis Hanson said it better than I can. I'm sort of at a loss, folks. I can't say anything new or creative here. Victor last night on Fox News sums up nicely where I think most of us are. Listen.
Well, I think the American people are angry, of course. I mean, this is the week, Harris, we had January 6th, June 6th D-Day, 79 years ago. Over 4,000 Americans died or were wounded on Omaha Beach, and they were not wounded for this type of stuff or died for this stuff. They died for equality under the law, and we're losing it. And I think they're also terrified. They don't know what the FBI or the CIA or the DOJ will not do. They feel they're capable of anything. They've had Andrew McCabe lie under oath. They've had James Comey feign amnesia 245 times under oath. They've had James Clapper lie under oath. They've had John Brennan at the CIA lie under oath. They've had Christopher Wray almost risk going to jail to stonewall an investigation. They had Robert Mueller feigning he didn't know anything about the Steele dossier. So I guess they're just exasperated. They think, what will these people in the IRS, the DOJ, the CIA, what are they not capable of? And they're scared. I don't think you can have a constitutional system when the people are scared of the government. And that's what I'm really worried about, because I think all of us, if you testify for Congress, as one journalist did, he goes home and the IRS has a note on his door.
Yeah.
And this is not America. And these people have weaponized, and they're destroying piece by piece, bit by bit, something that they didn't own. This came from our founders 232 years ago, and it wasn't theirs to destroy. And they've hijacked this, and they're trying to destroy this country. And I think the citizens are terrified. And I never thought I'd live to see that.
You know, it's interesting. As you were talking, I thought about something else that had happened, and that was the assassination attempt on a U.S. justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. And with Brett Kavanaugh,
Absolutely.
we saw a DOJ that was just uninterested. I guess that's the right word, uninterested.
Yeah, and they swarmed the justices' home. That was probably a felony to affect a impending opinion. They swarmed the house of Clarence Thomas. That was, the DOJ did nothing. They almost rooted it on. I never thought I'd see mobs going out in front of a Supreme Court justice's private home and screaming and yelling to intimidate them so that would alter their judicial opinion. And the DOJ, who were staffed by lawyers, just laughed at it.
It's hard to miss. Brett Kavanaugh is a Republican. He's a conservative. He's on that body. They are the scales of justice, blind scales of justice, but people who are on the other side of the aisle don't have blinders on. They see that he's different than what they would prefer on the left side of the aisle. Victor, thank you very much for being with me.
So I can't say it better than that. I thought he summarized it beautifully. I don't know if you're scared as much as you're mad, or maybe it's a little of both, but I think we all understand we're in a dark new place. And it is just 100% true what he said. I know it's become a meme and sort of a cliche, but this has nothing to do with him. And I hope everyone's very wide awake that this is not about him. I hope you are. I hope there's not a person in this audience that's not awake to what this is. It is not about Donald Trump. This is about anybody that dares challenge Democrat rule. They are telling you the words you can and cannot say. They are telling companies what policies and political prescriptions they will adopt. They are telling companies not to do business with us. They are telling banks not to do business with us. Controlling speech, censoring our speech through social media and other means. This is not about Donald Trump. This is about extinguishing opposition permanently and creating one-party rule in this country permanently. We soldier on here, folks. I'm not one for despair. I'm not one for gloom and doom. As Rush would say, I'll tell you when it's time to panic. I don't presume to tell you anything, but I will tell you despair is not my reflexive feeling today. Fighting like hell is my feeling today. I don't know about you, but I'm mad as hell, and I feel like fighting like hell to the extent that I can. And as I said to you yesterday, I don't know who am I? Who are any of us, if you were a Donald Trump voter or supporter, who are any of us to not stand with the man if the man's willing to stand and do this again? At this point, I'm not one for loyalty tests. I'm not one to tell people how to think or feel. But I really have to honestly ask anybody who voted for him twice and has now thought, well, I'm not going to do it again. I feel personally like I owe the man. I really do. And I don't, maybe that's ill thought out. Maybe that's overly emotional. Maybe that's, you can call it whatever you want, but it's how I feel. If the guy is willing to subject himself to this when it would have been just easier for him to go away, knowing that this would have gone away if he just pledged to not participate in politics ever again, that would have been the easier play, and I would have understood it. But he's not. And so I feel almost a sense of duty to the country to see this through. You may think that's too strong. I don't know. How each of the GOP's primary rivals reacted to the Trump indictment yesterday. Chris Christie We don't get our news from Trump's Truth Social account. Let's see what the facts are. As I've said before, no one is above the law, no matter how much they wish they were. Ron DeSantis, I think, struck the appropriate tone for a guy who's actually running for the nomination against Donald Trump. He said, "Why so zealous in pursuing Trump, yet so passive about Hillary or Hunter?" Before pledging the DeSantis administration will bring accountability to the DOJ, excise political bias, and end weaponization once and for all. Larry Elder brought up Hillary. Nikki Haley responded to Bragg's indictment in March, but didn't yesterday. Asa Hutchinson said our country finds itself in a position that weakens our democracy. Donald Trump's actions, from his willful disregard to the Constitution to disrespect for the rule of law, should not define a Republican party. Okay, so Asa Hutchinson is done. Mike Pence, during an interview with Dana Bash on CNN, said that while the handling of classified materials is a very serious matter, he didn't want to see Trump indicted for several reasons. I think it would be terribly divisive to the country. Mike, all due respect, sir, you mishandled classified documents. Your answer should be, well, if they're going to do it to him, I guess they'd have to do it to me, and they decided not to do it to me, so it doesn't make good sense that they do it to my boss, would be the appropriate answer, Mr. Pence. Bring in a guy that's much smarter than me to help me sort things out. Johnathan Emord, a constitutional law attorney. He's author of a book that was prescient called The Authoritarians. He's running for Senate in Virginia. Mr. Emord, the floor is yours, sir. I don't have much to offer. Good morning.
Good morning, Chris. People must come to the realization that this is a destruction of the foundational principle of equal justice under law, and that what they're doing to Donald Trump is really an injury to all of us, and it is a profound one. I don't care what political party you have. If you don't believe that there needs to be equal justice in this country, that the law has to be applied uniformly, that when the law is applied selectively to political opponents, that is the end of the rule of law, and it is the rise of tyranny. And you have a situation here, very clear political prosecution. Not a thing being done, not even a special counsel being appointed at all. In the case of Joe Biden, with the massive haul of boxes of classified information at the University of Delaware and in Chinatown in D.C. and the University of Pennsylvania, in his garage. And what do they do about that? Nothing at all. And when it comes to Donald Trump, and notice the huge distinction here. Biden was vice president at the time. He was not the commander-in-chief. Under Article 2 of the Constitution, the commander-in-chief has the inherent power to determine a document's classification. Donald Trump's people, Kash Patel and others, have said that Donald Trump intended for the documents he took with him to Mar-a-Lago to be declassified. And that was while he was president. This is a extraordinary event. No other president, and almost all of them, have had classified information among their papers when they've left the White House, has undergone this. I mean, where is the attack on Obama for this? As we said, no attack on Joe Biden. What did they do with Hillary Clinton? This is clearly selective prosecution. This is not something that we can stand. This is a two-tiered system of justice that utterly destroys the foundational principle of equal justice under law.
Mr. Emord, I just quickly off the top of the show, because it literally just kind of popped in my head moments before I started. So I played some clips of the James Comey press conference back in 2016 this morning that just to refresh my own memory and refresh us all on what he said about Hillary Clinton and the investigation into Hillary Clinton. And he laid out, if you remember that press conference, I do well, because I really thought what he was laying out were basically criminal charge referrals to DOJ based on what they'd found. And I mean, he said in no uncertain terms, she kept a server she shouldn't have ever had. Everybody knew she had it and she shouldn't have had it. She destroyed a lot of evidence that we were trying to find. She knows she did. She shouldn't have done it. She communicated and used that server for these highly classified conversations, which they have every reason to believe had been compromised because it was an illegal off-the-grid server. So she's destroyed evidence. She kept the server she shouldn't have had. All these, he's laying out this really unbelievable behavior, destruction of evidence, blah, 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 and then concludes with, but no reasonable person can conclude that there was willful intent. And so no reasonable person can conclude. He ends by saying we're not going to charge her and no reasonable person would. So I don't mean to relitigate Hillary, only to point out that at the highest levels of our federal government, they lay out a case so blatant and still say, given the nature, she's a candidate for president, we're not going to charge her, or we don't recommend she be charged. I was slack-jawed at the time, and Trump didn't put her in leg irons when he became president. We moved on.
And recognize, again, this is the Secretary of State doing this. This is a person who really should have been thrown in jail for this. Over 100 instances of classified information being transferred to her private server. And as you point out, it was completely admitted by Comey. All of the elements of the crime. Intent is not an element of all parts of the Espionage Act. It is a part of one element. The second part of the Espionage Act concerns instances of intent. The first part of the Espionage Act applies in a strict liability fashion. He didn't talk about that distinction, of course, and he whitewashed the whole thing. And it was patently political, and we, of course, now know the full extent to which Comey was embedded with the Obama White House and was fully cognizant and participating and promoting the attack on Donald Trump, an effective attempt at a coup d'etat in the United States. And when it comes to President Trump, however, there's no leeway where they said no reasonable prosecutor would undertake the prosecution against Hillary Clinton, where there was vast amounts of evidence that supported prosecution. In this case, we have the President of the United States, who under Article 2 has the inherent power to determine classification. It's his determination that governs how the National Archives and Records Administration must treat documents. The archives is so biased, they treat all of these people, Biden with kid gloves, Obama with kid gloves, but when it comes to Trump, even though there's an expression of his attorneys of complete cooperation, they act as if he had completely removed documents of the highest level of sensitivity and supplied it to our enemies. They treat him as if the facts support a conclusion that he, uniquely, among all presidents of the United States, is deserving of this prosecution. And it's so clearly political. It is so clearly designed to attack him because he's running for president. And if a federal judge condones this and enables this to proceed, and I certainly hope that the Court of Appeals, United States Court of Appeals, will not allow this. This is a travesty of justice that affects us all.
Yes.
This is this solidifies the two-tiered system of justice. We allow this to proceed, and what we are telling America is that if you are of the wrong political party, you are a target of the federal government, of the Department of Justice.
Johnathan Emord, to the extent that I even want to treat these as legitimate, the 7 counts, at least as it's being reported, include willful retention of defense information, obstruction of justice, destruction or falsification of records, conspiracy, and false statements. I mean, any one of those, Levin said last night, it's kind of stunning to think about. Donald Trump is of an age at 76 that if they're successful, he'd die in prison if they were successful. I mean, that, which kind of jarred me when he said it, but it was effective. To demonstrate the heavy-handedness of this. As our friend Andy McCarthy's reminded us, though, nothing precludes him from running, securing the nomination, even winning, and potentially pardoning himself. If you really wanted to walk this all the way out, how do you see this playing out in your view?
That's right. I mean, he can pardon himself. And the reality is that in this case, the special counsel Jack Smith is pursuing this matter really against what the FBI had said. As you pointed out, no reasonable prosecutor would bring this. In point of fact, no reasonable prosecutor would. And the reason is this fundamental point, that it is the president of the United States who determines the classification of a document. That's why there's this liberality by the National Archives when a president leaves and takes documents with him. That's why they have not gone after Obama. That's why they have not gone after Biden. It was based on this principle. But, of course, that principle is applied to Democrats now, and it's not applied to Republicans. So I guess any Republican president has to understand that he or she is going to be a target and is going to be pursued in a manner that is not characteristic of what they will do if the person is a Democrat. That's what we're learning from this. This is selective prosecution. What we really need is a full investigation of the Department of Justice and an interrogation by Congress of each of those who participated in the decision-making process with Merrick Garland to bring this action. Because it shows, I'm sure, selective prosecution. They chose not to go after Hillary. They chose not to go after Biden, but to maintain this endless investigation. But with Trump, in a very short period of time, they have decided that they will go after him with a vengeance. And this is a political prosecution, and it's time for the courts to rise up and strike this. Strike this down. This is a classic instance of selective prosecution.
Yeah, I mean, an appeals court could save the country from just burning to the ground, I think. And, of course, on the same day, this $5 million bribe surfaces, a document that House Oversight Committee believes ties the Biden family definitively to taking money from foreign entities for influence. This happens the same day.
The shiny object over here. Don't look at us. Yeah. Look at the shiny object over here. This is classic. I mean, are we that naive to think that these two things are not tied together? I mean, of course the timing of this is designed to create a deflection so that this horrendous information against Biden, where he's selling out our country and profiting massively to the tune of $5 million from this single instance, from a source that the FBI, this is no, Steele dossier source where it's completely rubbish and they know it from the start. This is somebody they paid over $200,000 to and view as a highly credible and highly reliable witness against the president.
Johnathan Emord,
doing nothing with it.
I'm so grateful for your analysis this morning. You can follow Johnathan Emord and his work, emord4va.com. He's running for Senate in Virginia, emord4va.com, at jemord1776 on Twitter. And his book, of course, pick it up. It's great. It's called The Authoritarians. Mr. Emord, thanks for your analysis on this Friday morning. I appreciate it. Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, he's the former national security advisor to President Trump. He's now co-chair of the Center for American Security at the America First Policy Institute. And General, not your wheelhouse, I know, to come on and talk politics, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you what you make of what's going on with your former boss here in the last 24 hours or so. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Chris. And Chris, thanks for having me. I guess it's a slow news day, huh? Look, I've been with President Trump since 2015, and I know him personally, and I know him behind the closed doors, what he was like. And this is really egregious, Chris. And I think you hit it right on the mark when you said we've never been here before. I was in the Oval Office, Chris, when we actually declassified documents. Not we, he did it because he was the only one who could really do it. With Gina Haspel, director of the CIA, I saw how it was done. I saw how he could do it. And there were times when he would sit in there and he'd say, "Look, I need to get this declassified, get it out to the public, and let them see it." And right there, I mean, we'd go out to the outer Oval Office, pick up the scissors, cut some things off it, do a scrubber, and Gina Haspel was right there. And the only person who could do that was Donald J. Trump or a president of the United States. And then when you look at the Presidential Records Act, he's allowed to take the documents he wants to take to his residence. I mean, so I'm looking at this going, this is crazy. And Chris, I have testified before the Mueller Commission, the 6th January Commission, and I've also been in front of the FBI on the documents case. And I told them that. And I said, look, guys, you don't seem to understand that the only guy who can declassify documents and keep those documents is the president of the United States. It's not the vice president of either party or a senator. It's the president. And I just look at it and go, the American. I think you're so right. I think the American people are so fed up with this and what they're seeing, those that are paying attention, that I think there's going to be a bigger blowback than I think a lot of people that are sitting in Washington, D.C. will realize. This is going to be an enormous issue, and people are going to fight to the finish on this one. And so I think you got it. And it's a pretty emotional issue for those of us that were in the White House and went through Russia. And I went through that, and I told the FBI this was really bogus. And when I went through the Mueller Commission, how bogus it was, and I saw how this president, Donald J. Trump, was attacked so fiercely. And I just don't know, Chris, how a guy like that can stand up. I mean, look, if this was you, I don't know about you, but if this was me or somebody else that I knew, the amount of pressure that's been applied on President Trump in the last 6 years has been absolutely incredible. And I just look at him, I stand back and wonder how he's able to stand up for this stuff, and he does it. And I mean, and I've talked to him recently, and I mean, his attitude is like, oh, God, I don't know. I'd sure like to have some of the water he's drinking or some of his DNA. It's
General,
amazing to me.
I said the same thing yesterday, and I said it again this morning. And I'm sorry, because I don't mean any disrespect to the rest of the Republican field. I really don't. And I respect who the Republicans ultimately make their nominee. But as a guy who voted for Donald Trump twice, as I sit here today, given what he's endured and what he's currently going to endure, I don't know how I can turn my back on the guy and go, well, he's done, he's cooked, who's next? That's not where my mind is. I mean, if I was ever trying to see my way to a different candidate than Trump, this made it very hard for me, if I'm to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, and I think that's a sentiment of an awful lot of people. The people I'm around are the same way. I mean, it's almost like, sort of like game on. Okay, this is, we have now thrown down the gauntlet, and we don't care about anything else. And people you got to feel sorry for is the rest of the Republican field out there.
I do,
because this is a guy who's been attacked and is standing tall and is going to fight his way through it. And I said, I remember when I first started with him, Chris, in 2015. This was a guy who was a billionaire, had a beautiful place in Mar-a-Lago, a place up in New York City, and with Melania and everything he had going for him. And he didn't have to do this. He didn't have to become or go after the presidency, but he wanted to do it, I think, at the time, and this is behind the closed doors. I really believe, Chris, he was doing it for all of the right reasons. And I looked at, and then I saw what he did in the White House, and I was privileged to be in the White House with the American people in all 4 years with him. And I saw how he operated, and I used to tell people, okay, tell me where our policies were wrong. You need to tell me, where did we have it wrong on immigration, or where did we have it wrong on national security? Where did we have it wrong in economics? Just tell me where we had it wrong. And you may not agree with it, but was it wrong? And nobody can do that. So it's all become a personality-based issue, and I think it's going to backfire on him, Chris.
You've been in conflicts, and you've been in the room discussing countries whose current leaders take out their political opposition. I mean, we don't do this in this country. This is stuff that we talk about happening in places like Honduras, for God's sakes, General. I mean, we don't do this here.
No, that's why it's so uniquely American, is how our system of government, the republic, is set up. And you're right, we don't go after political leaders. It was the intent. If you do go after political leaders, you get in a whole lot of trouble. And Biden's going after Trump. It's very clear with his Justice Department. And part of it, I was sitting there thinking, does he really realize what's going on? And there are times, Chris, I don't know if he does. And I'm not just talking what's happening politically, but in national security as well. And you have to sit back and you say, do you realize the firestorm you have set out in the nation? And then what goes around will come around again and bite you.
Yeah.
And you're right. We just don't do it in this republic. And it started. And to me, Chris, once that genie gets out of the bottle, it is really, really hard to put it back in the bottle.
I know. Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg with us. This is not why I had you, but I do appreciate your insights into it. The reason I invited you today was I just kind of wanted you to give us some commentary. Number one, I'm hitting rewind from a couple of days ago. The Washington Post had a story that really kind of made my jaw hit the floor, because even though there's some disagreement about whether what they've written is actually true, they reported that the German government claims that Ukraine was deeply involved in the explosion that blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Germany is blaming Ukraine. Now, some people continue to blame our government for having done it, or at least having knowledge of doing it, whatever. But the point is, Biden said that pipeline was blown up by Putin, and it didn't make sense to most of us then. And now the Washington Post and the German government at least confirmed that's probably not what happened. And then the dam this week in Ukraine, General. And the flooding is primarily, as I understand it, Russian-occupied territory. So here again, it's like Russia blew up its own pipeline, its own money flow. Russia blew up a dam and flooded their own territory. That doesn't compute, General. So how do you read it?
Yeah, I'll start with the dam first. It does compute to me that the Russians would do it. Here's why, Chris. The front in Ukraine with the Ukrainians facing the Russians is 600 miles. And when you look at where the Kakhovka Dam blew up, it flows south to a place called Kherson, which is in the alluvial plain down there. And what that explosion did, and I really do believe the Russians did it, is you look at a 600-mile front, that just took off 200 miles of the most advantageous axis of advance of the Ukrainian military to punch through their lines to get to the Sea of Azov and cut the Russian forces in half so they could pivot left or right and cut off Crimea. So from a military perspective, I said, and I don't like what they did, but it's operationally smart because it cuts down the area you need to defend by 1/3, almost 200 miles of that. This is the same thing the Germans did in World War II in Normandy around St. Mary-Glise, where they flooded the drop zones that they knew American paratroopers in the 82nd would jump into, and some of them drowned on the flooded fields. So it makes sense for the Russians to do it now. I don't think they did it very smartly because it was one of those, oh my God, look how much flooding. And it flooded a lot of the Russian positions, but it also cut off an enormously capable axis of advance for the Ukrainian military. So that's the reason I said I think the Russians did it, because it was purely a military call, because now it limited again some of the options Ukrainians have. And as to the pipeline, the Nord Stream pipeline, it was not, whoever did it, it had to be pretty sophisticated, because they had to know with the intelligence what was going on. They had to know what the explosives they were going to put on. So maybe the Ukrainians did it, but if they did it, they sure had to have some help. And the question is, who gave them the help to do it? Because that's not something like you just put a cherry bomb in a can full of water and it goes flat. This is one of those things that's hard to do. So when I look at it, I look at it and I step back and I don't put any emotion in it. I said, what does it make sense logically? Because I'm a big believer in pattern. If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, looks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And you look at the patterns that are set out there and you step back and say, okay, does this set a certain pattern? And all governments set patterns. You set patterns. I set patterns. And this is the pattern I see. So it was, to me, again, going, close the circle here, going full circle on it. We're back to the dam. I think it was an operational reason that the Russians wanted to cut off an axis of advance for Ukrainians. And they limited some of that by at least 1/3 of the territory. And it made enormous military sense to me. I didn't like it, but it's probably what I would have done.
And I guess I'll ask just briefly, Russia doesn't have the strength and the force and the ability to just crush Ukraine and be done with this. This is never computed to me. It seems like Russia would just be so much more advanced to just really stomp on Ukraine if they wanted to. Are they showing restraint here, or are they really that weak and ill-advanced? Or I don't know how to read this. It's odd to me.
Well, you go back over a year ago, and they violated about every principle of war you can violate when they went to the offensive. And in their offensive, which they were beaten at, they lost their best units, and they lost their best equipment. And they lost probably, the conservative estimate is they lost 200,000 dead Russian soldiers. The Ukrainians lost about 100,000 dead soldiers. It's amazing when you think about it. The Ukrainians have lost more soldiers dead than we lost in the Korean and Vietnam War combined. But right now, because of that, the Russians have to pull out of the inventory. As an example, they're bringing out what are called T-54 tanks. Those tanks have not been in the Russian inventory and operational since the 1980s. But because all of their first-line units have been damaged so badly because they performed so poorly at the start, and their frontline units and their commanders are so badly hurt, that they don't have the capacity right now to actually conduct a huge offensive. Now, they have manpower, and I don't think Putin's going to give up at all. And they can put manpower in it, but they don't have the capability right now, the capacity militarily to do it. And here's the second thing, and I think it's important to look back, is you look at who the generals are, the senior generals. Right now, Putin is relying on this guy called Gerasimov. He's the 5th general they've had. He's a defensive genius. He understands defense better than anything else. The Ukrainians have a guy named Zaluzny. He's an offensive genius. So right now, the accruing of ability goes to Ukrainians based on the Western equipment they've got and the Western training they've received against the defensive posture of the Russians. And I think this is going to be a really interesting thing to watch in the next 30 to 60 days, because I think you're going to head for a culmination point of some type. And if nothing happens on the culmination point, in other words, it's a draw, then you've got to figure out what the next steps are going to be, because nobody can afford an endless war.
Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, former national security advisor to President Trump. Just one last brief question, and that is on the Biden document that suggests he's taken gobs of money, him and his family, from foreign interests. I mean, as a former national security advisor, what does that mean to you? I mean, if in fact Comer has and the House Oversight Committee has what they say, Comer said last night he thinks they can find upwards of $20 million that's been deposited in banks they've yet to fully examine to Biden and his family over what we can presume was just influence peddling. As a former national security advisor, you say what?
Well, all the lights turn red, and the hair on the back of your neck goes up. Look, when I was in the White House, I had to divest all my stocks. And they look at you with a fine-tooth comb when it comes to financial issues. And if they even see a conflict of interest, even a minor conflict of interest, you have to divest, you have to explain why it is or what's happening, and you open it up. And because what they are concerned about is foreign influence, or influence not just of foreigners, but when it comes even to U.S. influence, through defense contracts has an ability to influence you, or a foreign government. Have you been involved with them before? Have you ever been a foreign agent? And you look at what's happening right now with what you're seeing coming out right now. And if the red lights aren't going on for people, then they are really, really missing this one, because this is a significant issue on influence. When we used to bring people in to see the vice president, we used to really vet them, and we wanted to make absolutely sure they were clean as could be. And if they weren't, we had in the meetings, we always had the lawyers sitting there with them, and somebody who was a note taker. We would never, Chris, leave the president or the vice president alone with somebody that we thought had anything that would be dangerous to the political future of either of them or of the country.
Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, always appreciate your analysis on all things, sir. Thank you for your time this morning. It really is. The jingle is true. For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit MyPillow.com. I'm sleeping like a baby. I can't lie about it. I mean, I have this MyPillow body pillow I use every single night. Tuck it under the blankets, lay next to me. I know, not very romantic on Valentine's Day, but most of us that have been married and you're sleeping nightly, after a while, people sleep hot. I don't know about you. I get hot. I need space. But MyPillow, what's so great about MyPillow and their new MyPillow 2.0 technology is it's exactly for people that sleep hot. So I get this side sleeping thing where I just can't sleep on my back or my stomach. I like sleeping on the side. Maybe you do too. This body pillow they make, it doesn't get hot, but it is so supportive. And it's 3 feet long. So it's just perfect to lay your head on. You can tuck it in between your knees to take a little pressure off the lower back or the knees. I love it. Plus, I'm on these Giza Dream Sheets, which are crazy comfortable. We've got the towels, which are super absorbent. We dry off with every morning, thanks to MyPillow.com. My dog, Dean, is on the MyPillow bed for the dog. Loves it. And that's just some of the products. Right now, I'm sipping my coffee. Mike has his own line of coffee. I got the light brew. I think next time I'm going to order the dark brew and try that. But all of these products and so many more, from the robes to the slippers, Christine loves her MyPillow slippers. You got to check it out. And if you go to MyPillow.com and order today, you use my promo code ChrisPodcast. ChrisPodcast. That allows you to save up to 66% on everything on the website. And it also lets them know that you listen to the podcast, which means a lot to me. They're advertising with me in the hopes to reach you. I know you're going to love the products, but when you let them know Chris Podcast, it gets you the discount and lets them know you listen. So thanks for that. It's a three-legged stool. Hopefully everybody wins. So MyPillow.com, promo code Chris, or for the best customer service, you should know everything you order, 60-day money-back guarantee, a 10-year warranty. So they're really high-quality products and made here in the United States. So 800-932-5056 to order in person, 800-932-5056, or MyPillow.com, promo code Chris. Let me share with you a brief story about yesterday, if I could, because I don't know where else I'm going to put this if I don't share it with you now. I've been doing some fill-in work this week for my friend in Washington, D.C., Vince Colonnese. Vince does afternoons in Washington, D.C., because my friend Larry is gone, so Vince is filling in for Larry. It's been like musical radio chairs this week. So yesterday, I'm hosting the show and talking about the stuff we talk about, as per usual, and Biden's had his press conference. We're talking about a potential Trump indictment. We're talking about the Biden scandal. And so naturally, we reach out to politicos who are nimble and able to talk about this stuff with great aplomb. One of those people is Philip Wegman of Real Clear Politics. Phil Wegman is he's a bright, brilliant guy. Love talking to him. Love talking with him. He's, I don't know, he's probably not, mainstream media doesn't much care for Phil. True?
Yeah, because he does get called on a lot, and he asks tough questions of KJP. So he's not the most loved among the other media outlets.
He is the White House correspondent for Real Clear Politics. A lot of his pieces get picked up by the Associated Press. So he's considered a mainstream media guy, but he's actually a genuine journalist. I like Phil. We have a great conversation. He's giving me great information. But it's what happened at the end of the conversation. And folks, I'm not making this up. This has become a real news story. Fast Eddie, can you believe it? They've written a news story about what you're about to hear.
That's amazing, Chris. When we talked about it yesterday, it was like, oh, that's really funny.
It was sort of a silly moment. Beltway Media has written about this like Phil Wegman had some kind of, I don't know what they're trying to, I don't know if they're like trying to discredit him or just tease him or make him, whatever. I don't know Phil personally, by the way, which is what makes this even funnier. I really don't know Phil. I have no even professional relationship with him. I've read his work. I've interviewed him before, but I don't know him. So as I'm wrapping things up, this is what happens.
Well, I'm glad you missed today's presser because we're better for conversing with you, Philip Wegman, at Real Clear Politics. He's the White House correspondent, and the most recent piece today went to print. Mike Pence takes the fight to Trump. Thank you, Phil, very much. Great to catch up.
I love you. Thank you.
Our telephone. Did he just say he loved me, Dave? Did I just hear Philip say he loved me? Did he think he was talking to his wife for a minute? I could swear I just heard him say I love you. Did he not just say that? He must be a big fan. I had no idea Philip Wegman was such a Chris Stigall fan. I love you!
So I was telling Eddie after this happened yesterday, I called him and I said, I wanted to move on. Like I'm wrapping up. I'm about to go to their traffic and weather there in the afternoon, and I'm trying to segue into the thing. And he clearly, it's like there's not a question. Play it. Just give it to me one more time because it's very clear what he said. There's no mistaking what you heard him say in response.
Conversing with you, Philip Wegman, at Real Clear Politics. He's the White House correspondent, and the most recent piece today went to print. Mike Pence takes the fight to Trump. Thank you, Phil, very much. Great to catch up.
I love you. Thank you.
I'm trying. He clearly says, I love you. Now, Fast Eddie, I could have, I suppose. It's not my show. I'm guest hosting. I don't know Phil. I could have just glossed over that. Some hosts might have.
Yes, you're right. I probably would have. But like,
I couldn't ignore it. There was no way I could ignore it because it was so clear. So Phil felt so embarrassed about this. Phil was just I couldn't understand what I heard. The staff there at WMAL is just laughing their heads off. Everyone's just losing their minds. I'm trying to maintain composure. Phil texts the producer of Vince's show with an expletive. And Phil says, "Oh, I'm so sorry. That's humiliating." He said, "I was reading a text from my mother at the same time Chris was talking with me, and I, for whatever inexplicable reason, read the communication in text from my mom." He was kind of I don't know if you've ever done that, where you're kind of half paying attention and you say something you're reading. I have done that before. So Phil tweets yesterday during a radio interview as the show was wrapping, "I got a text from my mother. The host started to say, 'Thanks for joining us,' and rather than going with the usual 'thanks for having me,' I accidentally said out loud on air, 'Love you.' I love you." So this morning, it's all over here's the press account of this today. I'm not making it up. Headline: reporter accidentally tells radio host, "I love you," while texting with mom on live hit. White House reporter for Real Clear Politics ending a radio interview on Thursday telling the host, "I love you," in a tone so earnest it prompted disbelief and eventually uncontrollable laughter. And I don't know if they think they've really got Phil here or what the hell they think they've got. This is a real media story. Oh, you can't make it up. I needed that laugh, folks. I needed that. I hope that helped a little bit.
The Chris Stigall Show podcast.